Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Weathering the Storm, the Manufacturing Expert Panel. This morning's program is brought to you by Blacktown City Council in partnership with the Hills Shire Council, Penrith City Council and Cumberland City Council. My name is Jeremy Carter from Rapport Leadership and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. I'm truly excited by the panel that we've put together this morning to share some of their insights and expertise on how manufacturers in the current environment really what they ought to be focusing on and how they can make the most of the opportunities that are currently there, as well as overcoming some of the challenges. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I've been a business coach for the last 15 years. My passion is helping small to medium enterprises grow to the next level. And I've been delivering the Smart Series business education for the Hills Shire Council for the last 4 years, and also started up the Business Success Program, Business Education for Blacktown City this year. Today's program has been put together by the Blacktown City Council, and I'll introduce the panel in just a moment. But just to provide a little bit of context to our discussion today, there was a report just released by the Department of Education, Skills and Employment that talked about some of the measurable impacts that COVID-19 is already having on business. So 58% of businesses have been affected a great deal. 67% have a lower demand for goods and services. And this is obviously leading to some significant impacts, including cash flow issues, reduction of staff, and also the need for businesses to be able to have to change their business practices to be able to adapt to the marketplace today. This is an ongoing study, so there's a link down the bottom there for those of you who are interested in staying up to date. Because I'm sure these numbers will continue to change. You can see there that 28% plan to reduce more staff in the coming months. So I'd like to take a minute to introduce the experts on the call this morning. Firstly, I'll introduce David Somerville, who's the Head of Economic Development at Blacktown City Council. He heads the Economic Development Strategy focused on small business facilitation, international trade, and the growing advanced manufacturing sector. Blacktown City Council collaborates with a wide network of business associations, state and federal government agencies, which is one of the reasons why we've been able to get all these amazing panelists on today. David's work very much revolves around connecting businesses and responding to the needs of the Blacktown City business community. David was also responsible for bringing in the Hills Shire Council, Penrith City Council, and Cumberland City Council to deliver these webinars in partnership. Next, I'd like to introduce Julie Lockyer, who's a Senior Associate at the New South Wales Treasury. She's an organisational design and learning and development professional with over 30 years experience in industries including education, manufacturing, mining and resources, oil and gas, government and retail. Julie has liaised with the diverse client portfolios, managed multiple projects, has a real grasp of principles relating to organisational design, learning, development, and manpower planning, working towards business, strategy, and outcomes. She has received international recognition for her work in workplace partnerships and high-performance work practices. Julie is currently implementing the New South Wales Advanced Manufacturing Industry Development Strategy for the New South Wales Treasury. Morning, Julie.
Morning.
Next, I'd like to introduce Michael Cullen, the Regional General Manager for TAFE New South Wales and for Western Sydney. Michael joined TAFE to contribute to a critically important modernisation program, which ensures that TAFE delivers high quality and contemporary education services that meet the needs of customers. Michael believes that the right training and transfer of skills are fundamental to Western Sydney harnessing its potential. He has a strong background in regional and economic development and a passion for delivering programs that provide communities and businesses with the tools they need to grow and prosper. Prior to starting at TAFE in late 2016, Michael has held roles including the Acting Chief Executive Officer and Director of Economy and Engagement with Liverpool Council, and Executive Director, Enterprise, Regional Development and Small Business within the New South Wales Department of State and Regional Development. Michael, welcome this morning.
Well, thanks very much for having us,
Jeremy.
And you're looking remarkably well rested. I can't believe the amount that you must have had to deal with over the last month in terms of shifting everything online. So we're really looking forward to hearing more about how TAFE has responded, and great to have you along today.
Thank you.
We also have Ray Kirby, who's the Associate Professor in the Faculty of Engineering and IT at the University of Technology, Sydney. Ray is currently the Director of the UTS Tech Lab, which is a research-led facility designed to promote new ways for university and business to collaborate. Ray joined UTS in 2017 from Brunel University in London, where he was the Head of Mechanical Engineering. His research interests lie in acoustics and noise control, and he has undertaken many collaborative projects with industry in the New South Wales region. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you.
We have Mark Goodsell, who's the Head of New South Wales and the National Lead for Manufacturing at the Australian Industry Group. Mark's role centres on public advocacy, representing the industry base of AI Group membership, specifically manufacturing. Mark's policy focus includes state and regional development, innovation, government procurement, skills formation, work health and safety, and business regulation. Mark's the Executive Director of the Australian Advanced Manufacturing Council, the Chair of the New South Wales Industry Capability Network, and a member of the New South Wales Skills Board. Welcome, Mark.
Welcome, Jeremy. Thank you.
Stefan Wagner, the Assistant State Manager of Oz Industry. He joined in the Department of Industry, Innovation and Science, and now leads on Oz Industry's business services coverage of the greater area of Western Sydney. Stefan started his career in the Australian Army, and from there he worked with the CSIRO in research and development, and the private sector in systems engineering, sales, marketing, and business management roles in the information and communications technology market, with companies including Alcatel, Optus, Nokia, Cisco, Telstra, and Ciena. He has also started and sold a successful licensed Telstra shop in Bowral and was the director of the Bowral Brewing Company. That's a very interesting background, Stefan. Welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And very excited, we also have Wayne Fallon, Senior Lecturer from the School of Business at WSU, Western Sydney University. Wayne's an educator and researcher in a wide range of business management topics, with experience in small and medium enterprises, manufacturing, technology, and the future of work, and in community development and capacity building. He has research and consultancy experience at both local and national levels. He's held leadership roles in Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore, and in private legal practice, focusing on commercial and corporations law, and has board level experience, including in the Peak Body Group for Work Integrated Learning in Australia. Welcome, Wayne.
Morning, thanks, Jeremy.
So today's panel session is Q&A, and we've been lucky enough to have a great response in terms of a lot of questions we'd like to put to the panel based on participants. But I want to start out with one question for all of the panel members, which is, in light of COVID-19, what should business owners and manufacturing businesses either be doing or thinking about right now to give themselves the best chance of survival or greater business success moving forward? So I might start with Mark.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'd identify four things businesses in any sector should be doing, but particularly manufacturers, including those that have not really been affected to date.
Sorry, Mark, can you hold your microphone a little bit closer?
Oh, can you hear me now?
That's much better, thank you.
Yep. Look, four things. I think the first thing is to understand that we're all in the health industry at the moment. Whatever sector we're from, if you're operating a business, you've got a responsibility to make sure that it is COVID safe. On the way into this pandemic, as things were shut down, that was not always made explicit, but it has been clearly being made explicit now as we talk about winding back out of things, that every business that is continue to operate or is going to be allowed to operate more than it has in the past few months has a responsibility to do so, so that its staff and any customers or members of the public that it
Mark, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Please hold the microphone up. There we go. Thank you.
Sorry.
Much better.
Yeah. So we so that's the first message: is you really have to understand how you can run your business, meeting all the hygiene, social distancing, and contact tracing protocols. And if you do that well, you actually become an asset in the fight against the infection, and you can help the authorities if there is a case of COVID in or around your business. You can actually assist in tracing contacts and shutting down that particular outbreak. So that's the first and most important point to make. Second, both levels of government, all levels of government, have thrown a lot of money at what was called stimulus, but is really just support mechanisms. JobKeeper is the main one, but the state governments and the federal government have a lot of other packages. Some of them, surprisingly, are undersubscribed. So making sure that you've got a handle on what all the support mechanisms you can access are, and applying for them is the second thing. Thirdly is communication with your staff, communication with your suppliers, and communication with your customers, so that you get real-time information about what they're seeing and what they're feeling. In any kind of crisis, then you can't communicate too much. And the rule, when people only listen when you've said something 7 times, probably applies equally now as it ever has. And fourthly, if you look at the companies that have been, those sectors that have been really affected up front, like hospitality and food service, some of the companies have managed to continue to operate despite drastic restrictions by really just understanding, well, what is our business? What is our capability? And applying it in a different way. There's lots of stories of restaurants that have become sort of takeaway liquor stores and turned into takeaway delicatessens rather than being full service restaurants. And so even in manufacturing, there are companies that are finding the service side of their business maybe have more opportunities than immediate manufacturing. So that's the fourth point, is just really understanding what your core capability is and whether it needs to be applied in a different way, at least temporarily. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we've seen with COVID-19 is it's caused us to stop thinking about business as usual and really adapting to business as unusual and looking at what the opportunities are in the marketplace right now. Julie, perhaps you could share with us your thoughts on what businesses ought to be focusing on right now.
Good morning, everyone. I think the challenges that we're having at the moment really are just the beginning. I think we've got to sort of be realistic in that, and we need to sort of look at things strategically. I've sort of been working with manufacturing companies over the last few weeks on emergency supplies, and a lot of them sort of are going into retooling, but they need to look at that from a business point of view. So a business continuity plan, it's like sort of what you were saying, Jeremy, that you need to sort of work on your business at this present stage, and sort of look at, if you are going to retool, sort of what is your long-term goal for this as well? Is this something that you sort of want to take on as a secondary sort of service or product, but sort of also looking at it from the point of view that are you going to upskill your workers? And I think that sort of here we've seen sort of the increase of advanced technology coming to the forefront as well. And therefore we need to look at sort of the upskilling of our workers, our existing workers, but also our new entrants and those that are sort of coming from other industries as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julie. Stefan, from your perspective at Oz Industry, what do you think businesses ought to be looking at?
It's a good question, and Mark and Julie have touched on a few good points there. The main one that I noted is it's consistent with what they've said is, and I had a conversation with a lady the other day who had a local manufacturing business, and she said that as things are changing, and even though, as I mentioned to some of you the other day, is that so far their pipeline in the manufacturing business is going okay, but she's taking the opportunity to actually try and work on the business. And I think it's easy for us to say that because we're sitting back here in roles of advisory, but when you actually get the business, it's taking the time out. And the one thing I've written down, and I know a lot of our department, our business advisors are doing a lot of this, is spending time and actually listening to your customers, having conversations with your suppliers. Don't assume people understand your business. Make sure that, even a lot of us here, we're in quasi, government roles, is that our satisfaction comes from you sharing your story with us and us asking the right questions. And the same thing applies to you in your business, is ask your suppliers what challenges they've been facing, how you can work with them, to your customers, do the same thing there. This is an opportunity to connect and really develop more depth in your relationships, because as Julie was saying, and Mark was alluding to this as well, it's about mitigating risks. And what COVID-19 has identified is a lot of risks in business. I've spoken to some manufacturers that are currently still doing very well, okay? But they do know that more, and it's a bit of a lag, more is going to occur to them very soon. But their order book is full. They've been managing their factory quite well with all the hygiene practices that Mark alluded to. But now, here's an opportunity. What do they do? And one example I want to also give to everyone, which I know Julie is very well versed in, is take this opportunity, because we're all now in a digital world. And what I really implore people to do is have a good look at their business to see what aspects of their business could be improved from a digital perspective. This is, again, it's easier said. There are tools available that we have available, complementing a lot of our other programs and services, which I can talk to later. But there is a tool that the Integrated Manufacturing Cooperative Research Centre, IMCRC, have publicly available to anyone, called Future Map. You can send around a link later, and you can use that tool to do a self-assessment on your business and see where you are in terms of the digitisation of your business under this banner called Industry 4.0. I'm not going to labour on it for too long, but it's essentially the platform is there designed so you get an assessment, and you can say whether your HR practices, your educational practices that Jimmy's alluding to, your manufacturing processes, the way you integrate with your suppliers, is that all up to the right level of digital integration using CRM packages, enterprise resource planning packages, all of those tools and things and acronyms. Here's an opportunity to learn about that and have a good look at your own business and work on that business. That's the key message that I think, and that will bring you through this and take you out the other end. Okay? Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stefan. So, Michael, if I had had a coffee with you in January and said to you that later this year you'll need to transition all of your teaching to online, and it will need to be done in a period of under 3 weeks, I'm sure you would have told me I was crazy. And it's amazing what a good crisis can do in terms of us discovering capability within ourselves and organisations. What do you think business ought to be focusing on right now?
Jeremy, I mean, that's a really good thing. I mean, actually, a managing director said the same thing. If it asked us to do 4 weeks ago what we've been able to do, we'd have said just not possible. So I think that's actually a really important lesson for us all to take out of this, that we can actually do things we didn't even think we could. Look, I think there's, just if I pick up 2 themes from others. So the one is about upskilling that Julie mentioned, and clearly where there is some time that can be used to upskill staff or businesses where they're not quite as engaged in the normal business that there's an opportunity to do that. And what we deliver at TAFE is really a range of things from online, as you've mentioned, but we are still delivering modified face-to-face delivery as well. as well as some other sort of connected forms of delivery. So it's not just online, that we are still delivering face-to-face in a modified way. So the two lessons for business from that are, one is that there's a whole lot of upskilling opportunities, even in basic skills around, computing, using social media to market, as people were saying, connecting with your customers through those sorts of skills. And there is a whole suite of free online courses that are available from TAFE. If you go to our website, there's a big tile on the left-hand side that says COVID-19 support. There we go. Thank you, Jeremy. Well done. And there's a whole range of things that I think in terms that can help people upskilling and sort of encourage people to take the opportunity for that. We've had about 85,000 people enroll in that so far, which is about 20% of what we do in enrolments in a year. So it gives you a sense of how popular they are. I was really pleased this morning to hear on the radio a university actually saying how well thought out, etc. they were. So that's the first thing in terms of upskilling. And if there isn't an ability to take on paid training, we understand that's there. There are all of these resources that are available for you that are free online. The second thing is our own practices in terms of face-to-face delivery, where we have factory setups, lace, etc. Actually understanding that risk management, this is Mark's point, is really important. Build on your existing risk management, understand how you clean your machines and how you practice those hygiene protocols and social distancing is actually a good lesson for us going into the future in terms of managing these sorts of epidemics if they do happen again.
Thank you, Michael. And I think that's a really interesting point for us to transition across to Ray, in that one of the things that this crisis is actually doing is sorting out those that have been working hard on taking their businesses to the next level versus those that may have been a little bit complacent in their manufacturing processes. Ray, what are your thoughts for business right now?
Well, obviously I bring a university perspective to it, and following on from the TAFE is our role as well, is to support and to help businesses transition towards the digital in the future. And it was good to hear Stefan mention the Manufacturing Cooperative Research Centre. And we are working, and we had discussions with them last week about how we could roll out the future map as support for business when they're looking to the future and not just now. And I think a role of universities there is to help support the transition towards the digital sphere in the future. And those areas are there to support thinking and forward thinking for the future, and the universities play an important role in doing that. And so one thing we're trying to do is to integrate with companies and work with them on how they might go around integrating the digital for the future. I think what COVID does for us is make us realise that business as usual is not an option going forward, and that this really forces us to think about how we're going to do that in the future. One thing we need to do better is to work together, universities, companies and government, and we need to work together to push and to help and support as we move forward with the new digital future that is looming in front of us. So I think we have within Australia and within New South Wales all the expertise and the facilities to help us do this and to help us support SMEs to move forward. I think what COVID will do is push us towards working together more closely and to helping to co-fund and support that transition, and to delivering the knowledge and support that SMEs need to help bring into their business the sort of skills and technologies that we're going to need as we move out of COVID.
It's pretty interesting when we roll out new technologies that once they're in place, we're like, how did we ever do business beforehand? But it's the power of a crisis, and we'll talk a bit about pivoting businesses, and would love you to share some of your success stories with some of the businesses that you've worked with a little bit later. It's quite astonishing what it can actually do. I'm just going to open a poll for everyone on the call this morning, and we'd love to hear from you how much has the COVID-19 really affected your business, and looking forward to coming back and hearing a few of your responses a little bit later. So let me pass across to Wayne from the School of Business at Western Sydney University. So Wayne, apart from the obvious things, what do you think is going to be the differentiator for businesses that come out of this crisis in the best possible shape? What should they be focusing on right now?
Thanks, Jeremy. And can I say thanks to David too for the invitation to be part of the panel. Thanks, David. What's important for businesses? Well, I think it's been occurring to me that there would be a strong resistance for businesses across many sectors to be more inclined to contract in difficult times. Contraction seems to be a knee-jerk reaction. My thinking is probably to resist that inclination to contract, and counterintuitive in some ways, but to adopt quite a contrary strategy, and that is to attempt growth. And growth in a lot of the under the surface characteristics, and that's been mentioned already by your panelists this morning. Things like growing and developing capability, upskilling, retooling, but doing this with a strategic purpose. Again, something else would be growing markets, and that would involve making connections across the sector into different aspects of the sector, not just manufacturing, but also logistics, transport, up and down the supply chain, these sorts of things. So looking at markets as well, with a big focus on business management strategies and who the new target audience is. There's been a lot of talk about what the new normal might be, and I have a suspicion that the new normal is not something that is going to happen overnight. It's going to be a progressive thing, and we won't understand what the new normal is straight away, that there's probably going to be some time before the dust settles. Markets are important for strategies. And the third thing there, I would say, would be talk about collaborations. It's already been mentioned that collaborations across different sectors, so industry, government and the education sector, but also collaboration within the manufacturing sector. In the research that we've done in Blacktown and with Dave, we've come across situations where firms have been invited to bid on a project. They haven't been able to do it themselves. So they've spoken with their mates down the road in the next block, those sorts of things. So that collectively, they were able to bring to the party capacity, capability to be able to achieve it. The final point, I suppose, is that my take on it, the research that we've done in Western Sydney on manufacturing does indicate to us there's a lot of variability out there. And I would expect that the variability, we've not touched base with the sector during Covid-19, but I'd suspect that the variability is even more so now. There are some manufacturers, we hear stories of, have pivoted to be doing different things. You know, the old stories about distillers now producing hand sanitizers. There's PPEs, masks, those sorts of things that are in the mix. So I suspect it's not going to be a snapback. It's going to be a staged change to understand what the new normal might be. But my thinking is that it probably brings on an opportunity for a reboot, a fundamental rethink about what the business was doing and what it might be doing in the future. Could be vastly different from what it was doing in the past. I don't really know what that is, though.
And we all wish we had a crystal ball, but I think one of the things we can do is this is a little bit like surfing. If we wait until the wave is upon us, we'll miss it. We've got to look out to that horizon to see some of these waves that are coming. And I'm really excited actually to connect back with Julie in just a minute for her to talk about what the future holds for manufacturing in Australia and whether we'll see more government focus on really supporting our local manufacturing industry. But I want to pass next to David Somerville, the Head of Economic Development at the Blacktown City Council. David, at a time like this, what should manufacturers be focusing on?
Hello there. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I think the three things that has struck me in this current climate is opportunism, resilience, and agility. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I know you look at some success stories. I'll give you a couple of examples of two businesses that have pivoted away from their standard business model, and some of the interesting aspects of that. We all know that, and Wayne just mentioned it, brewers and distillers have been shifting towards hand sanitizer production because of the loss of the supply chain loss temporarily from China. A brewer in Riverstone that was looking at hand sanitizers and thought making it's not a problem. Distribution is a major problem. I can't get the bottles. So what am I going to do? So he came up with a very innovative solution. He said, if I get some intermediate bulk containers, IBCs, I park them in a car park. I advertise the fact that I got 1,000 litres of hand sanitizer. If people from the local community come with their own bottles, they can fill up, and I will charge them at cost. And we bypass that whole bottling difficulty. Another brewer, this time in Cumberland, thinking, okay, I'm going to shift to hand sanitizer. We're in a crisis. How am I going to secure the pivot in the medium to long term? And this is something that Hilda Guerrero at Cumberland mentioned to me. He said, what they did was they said, we're going to get into 6 to 12-month contracts with a local hospital, with a local health centre, with the local pharmacies to secure supply in the medium term. And that way we can actually justify why we're pivoting away from our current business into this new product and to secure contractual supply for the future. I'll leave it there, Jeremy. I just thought I'd share some of those insights and may come back and talk the matters later if we have time.
Thank you, David. It's interesting. When one obstacle comes up, we need to change our level of thinking in order to get around it. And it certainly is business as unusual when our hands are consuming more alcohol than our mouths. And so many distillers are seeing that hand sanitizer is a great way for them to complement their product range right now. So, Julie, looking to the future, what do you see for manufacturing in Australia? We'll pass to Mark for the moment, then we'll come back to Julie. Mark, what do you see as on the horizon for manufacturing in Australia?
Difficult to be prescriptive about what the future is, but we have a strong suspicion that it will be different. We do know government is reappraising its relationship with some core supply chains. I think there have been suspicions that we have left ourselves strategically exposed. Most obvious, of course, is defence, where there already is a pre-COVID policy to reinvest in sovereign capability. But I think people have been shocked by our exposure in the medical area, pharmaceuticals, some core things that we take for granted in our living. We found relied on global supply chains that were suddenly broken. So I think there's going to be, I know there'll be a reappraisal of some sort of strategic. I think the other issue, the thing that fascinated me has been the public discourse about manufacturing. And one of the threats that we've had over the last few years was whether people wanted to work in manufacturing. We went into this crisis still facing significant skill shortages, and one of the drivers of that is a whole generation of people, particularly.
Lift your microphone up again.
We've got a whole generation of people and their parents in Western Sydney, for example, whose experience was manufacturing was dying, and you wouldn't want to work in it. So a lot of companies were struggling to get candidates for apprenticeships and traditional trade. So I think it's just as important as what governments think about manufacturing is what the community thinks about manufacturing, and whether it's something that it should have and it's something that they would like to work in. And if you look at what's happened over the last 2 months, the we've basically run an economy that's temporarily relied on health and IT, and both of those are STEM based. So I think this whole issue about attraction to STEM and people understanding the value of manufacturing's continued to operate, unlike a lot of the service industries. So hopefully there's been a reappraisal by the public as well as by the governments of the value of manufacturing, because if we don't have public support and a steady supply of new people coming into the industry, it doesn't matter what government does.
That's a fantastic point, Mark. It's really important that Australian consumers, shall we say, vote with their wallets. And I've heard calls already for supermarkets actually to have an Australian-made aisle, which I think is a terrific idea, because one of the challenges with supermarkets is there's so much choice there. To attempt to find Australian-made products in the mix of things can be quite difficult. So, Julie, I'm going to unmute you. What do you see as the future of manufacturing in Australia?
Can you hear me this time?
Perfect.
Oh, good. I was just saying, flowing on from what Mark was talking about, I think in the recovery stage, we need to make the most out of the opportunities that have been presented, especially for manufacturing. It hasn't been affected as much. It has been affected, but certainly not as much as some other industries. And this is an opportunity, I think, for us to really shine, not just on the national stage, but also on the global stage. I think sort of we've actually seen sort of we've been exposed to the vulnerability of our economy, and also to look at sort of that global disruption in the supply chains as well. And just on that side of things, I think you'll find that sort of we make a move within the advanced manufacturing industry development strategy to look at that collaboration between industry, government, research agencies, education, industry associations. We're working very closely with IMCRC, the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. I think together we can actually achieve sort of that shining light, rather than sort of just focusing on what government can do, what industry can do, what education can do. And I think that sort of, for example, with education, we need it to be industry-led, rather than sort of a supply-driven model that sort of educators tell us what we should be doing. Industry needs to play a vital role in that, and they are now. And I think we need to sort of do that. As far as supply chains go, we need to utilize the resources that we've got. We have a very remarkable institute called the Industry Capability Network in New South Wales that actually match makes sort of those companies with sort of, at the moment, it's about sort of companies that for example, might be wanting to go into the PPE area, but have a problem with, you know, sort of all of those packaging issues. And ICN can actually help in that aspect. We've got so many resources out there, but sometimes it's what we don't know. And we need to actually get out there and talk about it, and make sure that sort of the opportunities to broaden sort of our customer base, our expertise, look at it as an opportunity to also, so as I mentioned it previously, to upskill our workers. We've got, this is an example again of collaboration. We're working with the Australian Industry Group and the Manufacturing Skills Australia on sort of a implementation of the Industry 4 training. We talk about Industry 4, we talk about advanced technologies, but we need to make sure that every level of our workforce actually understands what data analysis can do for the company. Where do we use advanced robotics? Where does the Internet of Things come into it? And I think sort of there, you know, sort of where we've got two pilots, one in the Western Sydney region and one in the Hunter. And, you know, sort of you can just approach AI group and sort of find out a little bit more about that. I think collaboration is definitely the key.
Fantastic. I've got to say I've been very impressed with how quickly the federal and state governments have rolled out really quite comprehensive packages to support local industry and manufacturing. And there's some terrific ones there, specifically in terms of investing in new assets to increase capability. And there is a lot of help available out there right now for businesses. Not every business is doing great, but even for those ones that are, I think it's never good to rest on your laurels. We've got to look at how do we make the most of the situation. We're actually lucky enough to also have Anthony De Cruz from Service New South Wales on the call this morning. And Anthony, I wanted you to share a little bit about your initiative with the business concierge at Service New South Wales, if that would be okay.
Thanks, Jeremy. Sure. So at Service New South Wales, we want businesses and business owners to actually see Service New South Wales as a first step for business owners who need guidance and support as they navigate through these uncertain times. Service New South Wales here is here for small businesses. We can be contacted via the web. Thanks, Jeremy, for putting the slide up. And also over the phone, the 137788. We have Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. People can actually call us. What we have is a business concierge service, which is a free service, which a business concierge will give guidance on a range of things, such as understanding support that's out there for business owners and figuring out what and which services are the best for their particular business. The other thing that we also currently help via the business concierge service is for businesses to apply for the $10,000 small business grant. And that is as simple as going into our webpage, servicenewsouthwales.gov.au, and clicking on the Covid-19 banner that you see. And you will immediately get you can either request a call from a business concierge, or you can go directly and apply if you tick off all the boxes and the requirements that are there for the eligibility criteria, if you want to call it, for the $10,000 grant. The other thing we also are able to do now is there's a lot of fees that are being waived for businesses, and that's available on our page. All the fees that are waived, whether it be at the state or federal level, we have links to that, so you can actually even talk to a business concierge and find out what are the things that a business owner is entitled to from a waiver perspective. And the other thing that's happening now, especially with all the tenancy and lease agreements and queries going on about that, we also have links to friends at the Small Business Commissioner's Office, where a business concierge can direct you through to the Small Business Commissioner's Office, I should say, to get assistance with any lease or tenancy problems that business owners are having. So my recommendation would be any business owner who's going through an issue now, struggling, or even wanting to develop their product, as we always mentioned before, please visit Service New South Wales. We'll try and guide you through all the processes that are there and find out what information that you need, rather than, and don't feel that you're on your own. We are there. You know, we have a lot of friends out there now. Service New South Wales is one of them. So please visit us.
Absolutely, thank you. It's the challenge very often for business owners is it can be difficult to look at our businesses objectively, see the forest for the trees, so to speak. Ray, I was wondering if I could come back to you to share some stories of innovation and businesses working differently to, you know, in life and in business, we can choose to work harder or we can choose to work smarter. We'd love for you to share a couple of stories about businesses working smarter.
Well, I think the point raised earlier about universities, we need to work with companies to solve their problems rather than preaching about the things that we wish to do. So I think there's a lot more work we can do as universities in listening to what is needed and helping to solve problems. And in the advanced manufacturing space, we've got a team who work with a company to develop a 3D printer. It was spirals for separating out aggregate, and they were able to work with the company to build an entirely new bespoke 3D printer so they could take it out into the field and print new parts straight away. And this instantly cut out some of their supply chain. It saved them a lot of money, and they had value for that straight away. Now, this is not something that would normally be put down as university research. And so what we're trying to do, I think, within the university sector is to start working with projects that really deliver value for companies. And myself, I've worked with companies where I've developed new data analysis or computational techniques, and they've been able to design their products in different ways. And this has allowed that company to move into new markets. And they're now selling their products in areas that they were not doing before. And there are many other examples of universities and the way we engage with companies. And I would say with my UK background, companies were much more integrated into universities in the UK than they currently are in Australia. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do in the university sector and work with companies to help deliver value for the companies and to actually solve the problems that companies need us to solve. And so that's one of our challenges moving forward. And I'm sure with organisations like the IMCRC and other supporting organisations, we can all work together to start delivering those new technologies and delivering value for business as we move forward.
Thank you. So one of the challenges with change is it can very often bring a sense of grief and loss when complete industries change overnight. And one of my favourite books of all time is called Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. And it's about understanding that there's many places as a mouse that we can actually find food. Instead of just the same old, we need to look at what's coming. Mark, I'd like to pass across to you. What's coming? Where should business owners be looking for the next manufacturing opportunities?
What's coming? Ask me the easy questions. It depends on what time horizons you're looking at. I think there's going to be, as we've mentioned earlier, because of the disruption in global supply chains, and certainly in the short to medium term, there will be more opportunities in interesting places than there have been in the past. It's all dependent on consumer behaviour and private investment. Government is doing a good job at holding up its end of the bar, driving the economy, but what we're all watching, how the private investment market is going to contribute, and that really comes back to confidence and also consumers. It's interesting, I was on a call yesterday where people were talking about what's happening in China, and in China is pretty much, from an industrial capacity point of view, back up to speed, but consumers in China are still very skittish, except in the hometown of Alibaba, where they're spending online as much as or more than they ever had. So that traditional retail as a channel is going to be a bit problematic, but the online channels for both consumer and non-consumer goods are probably going to be bigger than they have been in the past. Government is going to be a good client in the short term, all levels of government, including local government, and they're also making reasonably concerted efforts to be good payers. Quite important at the moment in keeping cash flow going. I echo, as the chairman of the ICN New South Wales, I echo what Julie said about companies should register with the ICN to make sure that they're abreast of any opportunities, particularly on major infrastructure projects, but general government procurement generally. And I think the other opportunity, what was said earlier at the beginning of this webinar about using opportunity to upskill, particularly in digital skilling, and what Ray just said about the opportunity to reinvent your relationships with research institutions. Whatever the future holds, it will have different skill needs, and innovation will be at a premium, and premium will be paid. It's already being paid a premium for in the sort of retooling exercise. So that links with researchers and real-time education, micro-credentialing is going to be part of the future and can start now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. So, Wayne, I've got a question for you and your business knowledge. And it's one thing to be reactive in your business, but let's talk about being proactive. What are some of the things that manufacturers can do to really reach their vision forward to the future more?
I think any proactive inclination for the future really must involve elements of technology and becoming more familiar with what technology can do in processes, but also in outcomes around products, and Industry 4 has been talked about there. I think with my background, the point I would make is that what is new is likely to be new markets, and that probably has a lot to do with consumer behaviour. That can lead to the possibility of diversification in the business and new attitudes to diversification. But also, I think at some point we're going to get to the stage where the innovation is not only about technology, but innovation can be about business management practices that gets a new product to market, so that technology is, or rather than innovation being technology, innovation can also, I think, be driven by business management practices, and technology goes along to support that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Wayne. So, Stefan, I'm sure you've got a couple of things to add on this topic as well, so get people's thinking going.
Yes, please. I again agree with what everyone's been saying today. I won't labour on it, complementing what the ICM are doing, but I also want to give a shout out for the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. They're also attempting to collate and act as a portal for those that are wanting to contribute to solutions into the whole PPE space. So they're easily found, and I would encourage anyone who wants to learn about manufacturing. The Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre has lots of case studies, lots of really interesting information, a great learning tool that shares stories from across Australia. That's very easily accessible. So I encourage everyone there to get access to that portal. And playing on what a couple of the, Ray and Wayne had alluded to, I wanted to just emphasise that two things I want you to think about as manufacturers is whatever you do, when you engage and you collaborate, don't assume, I'm going to say this a couple of times, do not assume that the researchers, academics, or in fact even the entities, the public servants, understand your business or understand business in general. It's also incumbent upon businesses, and having been in a business, to actually really go ahead and help educate that relationship. So in other words, be prepared to share with the academic, with the people in the public service, what are your challenges, share your stories, what's actually making your business tick. So the way you form that collaboration is you actually don't ever assume that they know all of this. They don't. And I'll be the first to admit, I learn something every day, and that's the best part of my job. Yes, I'll be in business, but listening and learning and then playing that back is really important. So that's one really important message. The other one I wanted to really say with a bit of confidence here, that's using that word confidence that Mark said, and this is really important for everyone out there to appreciate where the future is going to be. And I think I've heard this in presentations from AMGC and Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre as well, is be prepared to really understand and sell the benefits and the value that your manufacturing is trying to create, and not just focus in on, here we've got government regulations, we've got costs. I know David and I listened to this great presenter from a pharmaceutical company, I won't name it for confidentiality reasons, and he emphasised that we need to be better at accepting that regulation in this country is exactly the differentiator why we are turned to in times like this? Why do customers here locally want to buy our products? Why do often people who want to purchase from overseas Australian products, and that's particularly in the food industry, is that our regulations, both in how we employ people, how we regulate our production, our manufacturing, our safety regulations, those values that make our products what they are, we need to embrace them. And I know this is easier said than done. It is a challenge. We need to really understand how we sell that as a benefit rather than trying to just compare apples with apples when our apples are entirely different, excuse the pun. Accept the fact that we have good regulations that make our products here that we manufacture incredibly valuable. So the message is help teach academics about your business, and two, really understand and mathematically try and sell the benefits of those costs and those regulations that form every aspect of your business in your entire supply chain, your value chain. I know that's all jargon, but that if you can do that and get better at that, you will then be able to position yourself into this future and compete, and then sell even to the local consumers. Local consumers, the media says buy cheap. Well, what does that mean? Buy Chinese, which, I'm not discrediting Chinese products. At the end of the day, they are for what they are. They are cheap. Okay? But we need to understand how we manufacture and be prepared to sell the value of that. And that's a strong message, but that's how we're going to be successful in the long-term future. Without going into it, I can go to business.gov.au. There are lots of support services for business that are available, not just for COVID-19, but also all the advisory services that are available both state and federally, are all visible on that website. Write it down, www.business.gov.au. It is worth going to that website. The amount of information available and all the linkages are all there to help. Thanks, mate.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Stefan. And the results of our poll, we have almost 50% of people reporting businesses slowed, 30% say their businesses stopped, 20% about the same, and 10% have actually reported an increase. So we had a question from one of the pre-registrations, which was, well, what government support is there for manufacturing? And I'm going to pass to Julie for this one, because I think that you do need to dig a little bit, but there are some amazing packages out there really to get behind Australian manufacturers and support their research and development efforts. Julie?
Yes, well, just on the research and development, the Office of the Chief Scientist and Engineer has actually funded the New South Wales Smart Sensoring Network to work with industry to actually find that pathway that sort of Stefan was talking about, where you can actually take research to commercialization, because industry is looking at the end result. They're looking at sort of, well, what's the return on investment for the time, the effort, and also the funds that are being put forward. But they need to know which university that they should be working with, which professor within that university, what unit. For example, UTS has got so many different fabulous sort of divisions within it. And so does the Western Sydney University. Do we go to Launchpad? Do we go to Rapido? All of these sort of areas, and we need to sort of have somebody to help us navigate. And then the industry development strategy within advanced manufacturing then highlights those to other members of the industry. We also have, at the moment, we have the portal for the COVID-19 emergency supplies. We've been overwhelmed by the amount of companies that have put their name forward for that. And what we've realised is that the New South Wales government will sort of, they'll want large quantities of this, but we also need to sort of make sure that there's a business to business sort of reference here as well. So we've set up the Buy New South Wales sort of webpage, which is buy.nsw.gov.au. And that way we can actually sort of look at the companies that have put their name up on the portal, look at their capability, and then match companies to companies. And we can do that through the ICN as well. Often we will actually fund other sort of organisations to sort of do that type of work of connecting sort of industry to the right avenue. We also have to look at sort of our training. We've got an excellent training system and funding system in Australia, and New South Wales is funded under the Smart and Skilled. And we look at sort of, well, what are the opportunities that that we have at the moment? And we've seen that sort of dramatic increase of online learning. And sometimes registered training organisations have to modify their learning. So we need to support them in that as well, and look at sort of, well, if we're going to upskill our workers and we're going to sort of look at the knowledge that they need, sort of how can we do that? How can we sort of convert what was going to be sort of face-to-face learning into an online environment and make it interactive so that people still have those adult learning principles of, you know, being able to do something and actually see the end result as well. And I think that sort of the normal sort of support mechanisms that we have within government are sort of the stimulus packages, and Service New South Wales is probably the best avenue to go and look at sort of what Service New South Wales can provide in sort of the advice, as well as the link to some of those stimulus packages. But our job isn't sort of finishing now, it's continuous. And we do have the Advanced Manufacturing Industry Development Strategy. And as I've pointed out, we do collaborate very closely so that sort of we have less repetition of things that are going on and support, and that we all work together. I think AMGC, the Growth Centre, is very good at bringing us all together, sort of in workshops that sort of we can let companies know what it is that they can access and when they can access it. And it's about sort of that collaboration again.
Fantastic, Julie. In fact, I read yesterday that the federal government's just handed out $50 million worth of grants for the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund. And if there's one theme that's really been common throughout today, it's about being proactive. Proactive in our organisations, but also being proactive in our communications with our clients, but also as customers, for us to actually talk to the organisations we buy from and ask them for what we can do to support more Australian, for us to be proactive and speaking to our local members of parliament and once again voicing our concerns. I think we call Australia the lucky country, but I think sometimes we can be a little bit complacent and think it's up to the government to fix it, when it really comes down to each one of us and us individually taking responsibility to make a difference. So David, I want to throw back to you just in closing for today, because you were the proactive one who really pulled all this together. You saw the need, economic development at Blacktown City Council, and I'd like to commend you on that and give you the opportunity for a few closing words.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. It's been great to have with all aspects of interested parties, with business associations, state and federal government, the university sector, all of us coming together to discuss these very pressing matters. I think that this current pandemic has actually triggered a rethink in federal government that manufacturing is an important component of our economy, and really made them think. And for example, Nev Power is the National COVID Coordination Commissioner, and I think that there's now almost a rethink at the federal level as to the sovereign risk that we've undergone recently in key products can't be repeated. What we need to identify is what we do well, and to build on that in medical technology, aerospace, biotechnology. And I think that manufacturers coming together and enhancing those key value adds. I think most of us have talked about how can we value add at the top end of the manufacturing world, and learn from other countries. Singapore has been exceptional in linking their universities, their research centres and their manufacturers together with government support. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to really continue this conversation over the weeks and months ahead. I'd like to think that we might continue this in another webinar in a few months' time to revisit where we are, where we got to, and how we're going to go forward collectively as a country.
And for everyone on the call today, we'd really appreciate if you can take just 2 minutes to give us your feedback on the webinar today, and also what you would like to see as future topics. I'd like to take a moment to thank all the amazing panelists, Mark, Julie, Stefan, Michael, Ray, Wayne and David, for being so generous with your time and expertise this morning. It's been just wonderful, eye-opening and exciting, and I, for one, am looking forward actually to watching a replay of this. There were so many gems that were dropped that I'm sure that everyone on the call today got some amazing value, so thank you guys. And I'd also like to thank Blacktown City Council, the Hills Council, Penrith City Council and Cumberland City Council for making today a reality. Thank you all for attendees for also coming along today and spending your time with us, and sincerely hope you take some of this knowledge and apply it to take your organisations to the next level.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, as well. Cheers.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone.